Okay, it's loading. All right, y'all are now live. Let me make you host again. Make host, change host. Okay, cool. All right, y'all are now live. All right, y'all ready to start?
All right, thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Well, we've just been told we can go and get started. So I'm going to go and call the case of the estates of Genesis Petrillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Rapond. Scoring judges, if you'll look to the two buttons on the lower left of your screen, please remember to keep your audio and video off until you're told otherwise. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. This means only people on the screen right now, the only people on the screen right now should be the advocates and me. And now I'm going to go ahead and ask the attorneys to make appearances. We'll start with plaintiff's counsel first.
First, Your Honor, may I introduce myself?
Yes, please do.
My name is Joseph Jordana, and I'll be representing the plaintiff. Before we make appearances, Your Honor, permission to approach and tender a few documents that might be helpful in today's trial. They include stipulations, special instructions, and relevant case law.
Sure, unless there's any objection from defense counsel.
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'd like to point your attention to stipulation 3, which states that exhibits 1 through 10 have already been pre-entered and administered.
Okay.
Your Honor, I would also like to direct your attention to invoke Rule 615, which is constructively sequestering witnesses excluding party representatives.
The rule is so invoked.
And Your Honor, I would also like to invoke Rule 603, where all witnesses are already pre-sworn in.
Yes, witnesses will be considered pre-sworn.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd also like to direct your attention to some relevant case law. The first is America's Best Cookie versus International House of Waffles. And that says that any out-of-court statements, even made by the witness themselves, is considered hearsay.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'd like to inquire if you have any preferences for constructively approaching witnesses today.
Given that we're in the unique Zoom platform, you don't need to ask to approach. Just go ahead and do whatever works best for you. I think since we're in Zoom, I don't think you need to ask to approach.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, can we consider that all sustained objections shall result in the striking of that testimony in court today?
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with that, I'd like to introduce my co-counsel. First, Priya Jain.
Good evening, Your Honor.
And Pranil Jadhav.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
And with that, the plaintiff is ready to begin.
All right, defense counsel, we'll turn to you.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Maida Arangian, along with my co-counsels, Narim Algafir.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
Victor Castro.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
To represent the defendant, Harper Martini, in today's case. I would also like to indicate that our party representative is Harper Martini.
Okay, so noted.
No further pretrials, Your Honor. At this time, the defense is ready to proceed with opening statements.
All right, perfect. We will now hear opening statements from each party. Everyone, please make sure that you are in speaker view. That's going to be on the upper right of your screen. Attorneys, please remember to mute your audio when the other attorneys is speaking. And we'll go ahead and proceed with opening statements, and we'll start with plaintiff's counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. I am afraid Harper is going to kill me. This was one of Genesis Petrillo's final statements before he passed away. June 8th, 2019. What was supposed to be the most magical day for Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo turned into the worst day of Casey's life when she found out that her beloved Genesis had passed away from pesticide poisoning. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't any ordinary accidental poisoning case. Genesis was intentionally poisoned by her soon-to-be mother-in-law, Harper Martini, because of the bad blood between Harper and Genesis. And that is simply what this case boils down to today: bad blood. Let's go back a couple years to when Casey met Genesis, fell in love with Genesis, and made the mistake of introducing Genesis to her mother, Harper. The moment that Harper met Genesis, life was never the same again for Casey and Genesis, because that is when the bad blood began. Harper, being the clingy helicopter parent that she is, hated Genesis from the moment she met him and did everything in her power to keep Genesis away from Casey. Harper initially clung on to the hope that Casey and Genesis would break up and Genesis would be out of their lives forever. However, things took a turn for the worse when Casey and Genesis decided to get married, because at that moment, Harper knew she had to take matters into her own hands and do whatever it took to remove Genesis from Casey's life. Angel Rodriguez, Genesis's longtime best friend, will come on stand today and tell you how she constantly witnessed yelling and fighting between Harper and Genesis, especially as they were getting closer and closer to the wedding day. Harper was always criticizing or insulting Genesis and did anything she could to get rid of Genesis. Harper would repeatedly call Genesis a pest and talk about using a Genesis pesticide. On June 7th, 2019, about an hour before the rehearsal dinner, Angel Rodriguez witnessed Harper heading for the kitchen with a canister of pesticide. And when Angel asked Harper why she had the pesticide, she said, "It's for Genesis, because he is such a pest." And at the rehearsal dinner, Harper gave Genesis a bottle of Cara wine that she said was for Genesis and Genesis only. This Cara wine was the only bottle that Harper had in her kitchen and was only given to Genesis because it was the bottle of wine that was contaminated with the pesticide that Harper had put in there with the intent to kill Genesis. And after Genesis drank this Cara wine, he fell very sick that night and had to be rushed to the hospital. Dr. Jimin Kwan, the chief emergency physician that treated Genesis, will come on stand today and tell you how the only possible cause of death is organophosphate pesticide poisoning, because Genesis's symptoms matched up perfectly with this diagnosis. Now, as the plaintiff today, we hold the burden of proof, and the burden in today's case is by a preponderance of the evidence. This simply means that it is more likely than not to have occurred. It is more likely than not that Harper Martini intentionally mixed pesticide into the wine that was given to Genesis Petrillo with the intent to cause harm. To better understand this burden, visualize the scales of justice and place the evidence presented by each side on this scale. When you look at this scale today, at the end of the trial, you will find bad blood weighing down one side. And as a result, you must find Harper Martini liable for battery.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, you may proceed with your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, may it please the court. Love of liquor led to loss. On June 8th, 2019, Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto were supposed to meet. A sacred bond was going to be formed between the two, but that all shattered when Genesis Petrillo sadly passed away at 9:27 a.m. Genesis began exhibiting symptoms the night before, June 7th, 2019, the night of the rehearsal dinner. These symptoms included nausea and vomiting. Petrillo smelled of wine and appeared intoxicated. His speech was slurred and he experienced stomach cramps and tightness in the chest. Symptoms of alcohol poisoning. You see, Genesis Petrillo died of poisoning, but it wasn't pesticide poisoning. Members of the jury, opposing counsel just got up here and painted Harper Martini as a monster, one who would be willing to kill her own son-in-law. While there was tension between Harper and Genesis, as in many in-law relationships, Harper never had the intention, nor would she ever take the action to kill Genesis, the future spouse of her beloved child. Harper was worried that Casey would suffer the same loss she had gone through, the loss of a spouse. You see, Genesis's love for liquor was reckless, often drinking too much. And Harper wanted nothing more than to protect Casey from the possibility of loss. In today's case, the plaintiff has the burden of proof. They must prove 3 elements: intent, action, and harmful or offensive contact. Again, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if they do not satisfy all 3 elements and prove that it is more than likely that Harper Martini poisoned Genesis, then they will not have met their burden of proof. But you will see that they will not be able to meet that burden because it was the love of liquor that led to loss. As a defense, we have no burden of proof, yet we will call 3 witnesses to tell you the true story of what happened on June 7th, 2019. First, you will hear from Blair Osborne, a wedding planner who took it upon herself to enact the vision Harper had for her child. Ms. Osborne will tell you about how much Harper Martini cared for Casey and how dedicated she was in creating the perfect wedding despite the difficulties that Genesis presented. She will tell you that on the night of the rehearsal dinner, Harper tried to bury the hatchet with Genesis by gifting him a bottle of Cara wine. She will tell you that Genesis loved liquor and had been drinking the night of the rehearsal dinner, so much so that Miss Osborne's last words to Genesis were to drink some water. Next, you will hear from Austin Lewis, the head winemaker at Peony Estates. She will show you that Harper Martini truly loved Casey and would do nothing to ruin her child's wedding. She'll tell you that the reason why that bottle of Cara wine tested positive for pesticides is not because Harper Martini intentionally poisoned Genesis, but because it was in a dumpster where Austin Lewis had thrown away a pesticide canister that had some pesticide left in it. She'll tell you that she had sprayed the premise only a couple of days before the wedding in order to ensure that nothing would ruin that special day, and that remaining pesticides in the dumpster could have easily contaminated that wine bottle. Finally, you'll hear from Harper Martini herself. Not only will she confirm all the rest to be true, but she will show you that the reason she kept pushing Genesis away was that Genesis was a bad influence on Casey. She will tell you that Genesis had no sense of how much alcohol was too much. She will tell you that on Casey's 24th birthday, Genesis made a drinking bet with Casey that ultimately put Casey in the hospital with alcohol poisoning. Harper will tell you that she felt Genesis's love for liquor was greater than his love for Casey, and that she feared that that would ultimately lead to loss. She will remind you of one constant thing: nothing mattered more than Casey. Her dislike for Genesis was never greater than her love for Casey. The plaintiff is going to try and convince you that Genesis' death was caused by intentional pesticide poisoning. But at the end of this case, it will be clear that Genesis' love for liquor led to loss. That is why at the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Victor Castro, will come before you and ask that you find Harper Martini not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Before the plaintiff calls their first witness, I want to ask everyone to switch to gallery view. That button's also going to be on the upper right of the screen. It will allow you to see the attorneys and the witness at the same time. Plaintiff's counsel, you may now call your first witness.
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
You can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Can you please state your name for the court?
My name is Angel Rodriguez.
What do you do for a living, Angel?
I work as a kindergarten teacher at Rapid River Valley Elementary School.
When did you first meet Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo?
Well, I first met Casey and Genesis at Chuggy Sports Bar in 2016 at a trivia night through our mutual friend Drew. A couple drinks in, the three of us, best friends.
What was it like being friends with Casey and Genesis?
Well, even though they had been together years before I knew them, I never felt like the odd one out. And when they got engaged in July 2018, I was absolutely ecstatic. They were the kind of couple that just seemed like they were supposed to be together forever.
What happened after Casey and Genesis got engaged?
Well, after Casey and Genesis got engaged, we all went to Casey's favorite winery, Rosie and Pedro, to celebrate.
And what was the wedding planning like for the wedding?
Well, the planning honestly seemed to fall perfectly into place. That is until Harper Martini got involved.
What happened when
Objection.
Harper got...
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
What is your response, counsel?
Your Honor, my witness is not speculating into the mindset of anyone. She's basically stating her rationally based perception of what happened when Harper got involved.
Defense counsel, I'll hear your response briefly.
Defense is just ready to move on.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection. You may proceed and re-ask your question if needed.
Yes, Your Honor. Angel, what happened when Harper got involved?
Well, when Harper got involved, all of the plans seemed to change. The wedding was supposed to happen at Rosie and Pedro, which was Casey's favorite place, but she demanded that it happen at Peony Estates, along with a whole other slew of changes.
What was it like working with Harper on the wedding planning?
Well, the more time I spent around Harper preparing for the wedding, the more it became clear that Harper didn't like anybody who was especially close to Casey.
What do you mean when you say Harper didn't like anyone that was especially close to Casey?
Well, Genesis is one of the most likable people I know, but Harper always seemed to criticize and belittle Genesis, and it became really uncomfortable at times. As the wedding got closer, the conflicts became more explosive. There was definitely some bad blood between Harper and Genesis.
When was the next time you witnessed some major conflict between Harper and Genesis?
June 7th, 2019, the day of the rehearsal and rehearsal dinner. Genesis and Harper could not stop fighting. I did not think they would ever stop fighting that night. At one point, Harper actually said that Genesis should just leave and save their family the headache. Otherwise, she would make Genesis disappear.
What happened after Harper made this comment about Genesis disappearing?
Honestly, things got really scary. I saw Harper grab Genesis and pull him into a hallway, and then a few minutes passed till Genesis came back.
What happened when Genesis came back?
I had never seen him so scared in my life. What frightened me when Genesis came back was, What frightened me when Genesis came back is he told me that Harper was gonna kill him. I initially laughed because I just assumed Genesis was joking because I didn't think anybody would say that, but Genesis didn't smile. It was clear that Genesis was extremely scared of Harper by the end of the rehearsal, and honestly, I was too.
Did you ever see Harper again after this incident?
I did see Harper walking towards the kitchen with a bottle labeled pesticide, and then something really weird happened.
What do you mean when you say something weird happened?
Well, Harper told me the pesticide she was holding for Genesis was for Genesis because Genesis was such a pest. I was honestly absolutely flabbergasted that she would say such a thing. She later clarified it was for a cockroach, but honestly, I was really scared of her at this point.
What happened after you encountered Harper going to the kitchen with this pesticide?
Well, next was the rehearsal dinner and toast. Casey and Genesis gave absolutely beautiful toast, but when Harper got up there, it was so uncomfortable for everybody in the room. She mocked Genesis and called him a problem child.
Did anything else happen with Harper that night?
Later in the evening, around 10 p.m., Harper surprised everybody by giving a second toast to Genesis. When Harper made the second toast, she gave Genesis a bottle of wine and smiled. It honestly would have been incredibly sweet had I not seen Genesis so terrified earlier.
Was Genesis the only person that received this bottle of wine?
Harper gave everyone their own bottles, but me and the rest of the wedding party got bottles of Horizon wine. Genesis was the only person to receive a bottle of Cara wine.
Was Genesis the only person that drank this Cara wine?
Genesis offered it to everybody at the table, but I was the only person to accept a glass. I took a sip, but I spit it out because it was absolutely disgusting.
Did Genesis continue to drink this wine?
Over the next 45-ish minutes, I drank a couple cocktails while Genesis drank several glasses of wine from the bottle that Harper gave him.
Have you seen Genesis consume this much alcohol before?
I had known Genesis for 3 years at this point. I had drank with him before, and him consuming a lot of alcohol was nothing unusual. I had seen Genesis drink so many more times than this without even getting a hangover.
So how was Genesis's condition at this point?
Around 11 p.m., Genesis got up to dance, and it was immediately apparent that something was very, very wrong.
Why did you think something was wrong with Genesis?
I had never seen Genesis so out of it before. His slurred speech was in no way in line with the amount of alcohol I'd actually seen him drink.
Did Genesis continue to drink this night?
From what I recall, I don't remember him drinking anything else. Our friend Drew is with us, and I was talking to him for a while until I eventually noticed that Genesis was slumped over in his seat.
What did you do when you saw Genesis slumped over in his seat?
I decided to take Genesis to his room, but things only got worse from there.
In what way did things get worse?
Well, I took him to his room, but he was in awful shape by that point. He could not stop throwing up. His skin was paper white. I tried giving him water, but he kept throwing up. So I had to call 911, and I rode with him to the hospital.
What happened when you arrived at the hospital?
I waited for the doctors to give me an answer for what felt like hours. I tried calling Genesis' family, but no one picked up.
Did you call Casey?
I've honestly always regretted this, but I didn't call Casey because I didn't want to ruin her special day. I was just hoping that Genesis would be okay by the time of the wedding.
Did Genesis' condition improve for the wedding?
No, sadly not. He slipped into a coma around 8 a.m., and the doctors told me it was likely due to some kind of pesticide poisoning. After that, I rushed to Peony Estates because I knew that Casey needed to know.
What happened when you arrived at Peony Estates?
Well, the first person I ran into was Harper, and before I could say anything, Harper said something really weird. She said, "Genesis got poisoned? Oh no. I will have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. Casey needs to know." That was really odd because I had not said anything about Genesis being sick, much less Genesis being poisoned.
What happened after your encounter with Harper?
Well, I went to Casey's room and I explained everything to her. Having to tell Casey that Genesis was in a coma on what was supposed to be their wedding day was the second most heartbreaking moment of my life.
What happened after you explained everything to Casey?
Casey and I rushed back to the hospital. Harper didn't even offer to come with us.
What happened when you and Casey arrived at the hospital?
Well, just as we got to the floor where Genesis was being treated around 9:30 or so, the doctors told Casey that Genesis had died. That was the most heartbreaking moment of my life.
No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Hello, can you hear me, Angel Rodriguez?
Yes, I can.
Okay. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, absolutely.
Miss Rodriguez, you weren't involved much with the wedding planning, correct?
I mean, I wasn't the wedding planner, but I was definitely involved to some extent. I
And
helped
at the
them
time of the
any
wedding,
way I could.
Thank you. At the time of the wedding, you only met Harper once or twice, correct?
Yes,
And to be clear, you were informed of the wedding changes by your friend Drew, right?
yes.
And Drew also informed you that the situation was toxic, right?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response, counsel.
This isn't hearsay because Angel Rodriguez was there at the time. So in her present sense situation, it's not hearsay because she witnessed it at the time.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, any statements made by her friend Drew are still considered hearsay because they're out of court statements.
I'm going to sustain the objection if you'll move on, counsel.
Yes. However, you never knew the full story of this, correct, Angel?
No, I never knew the full story, but I did know from what I got that it was a really toxic situation between Harper and Genesis.
As Casey's mother, Harper was very involved with the wedding planning, correct?
Yes.
And most arguments between Genesis and Harper were about the wedding planning, right?
To my knowledge, I believe so, but I don't know every argument they ever had. So.
And during these arguments, did you notice Casey defend Harper at all?
Well, there was a lot of back and forth between all of them. Like Genesis would defend Casey. There was just a lot of back and forth a lot of the time.
Okay, and to be clear, when Genesis and Casey argued, it was about Casey's arguments, right?
Could you clarify that question? I don't really understand what I'm being asked right now.
Yes. So to be clear, during arguments made, where Genesis and Casey argued, was it about Casey's actions?
No, it was generally about Harper.
Okay. Well, let's move on to May 11th, 2019. This was the last party before the wedding, correct?
Yes,
And you, Casey, and Genesis had too much to drink that night, correct?
we did. We did drink a lot. Yeah.
And to clarify, all three of you were drunk that night, right?
Yes, we were drinking heavily. It was a party before their wedding. So yeah.
During that party, did Casey and Genesis talk about the wedding planning at all?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response, counsel.
I'll just withdraw that question.
All right, let's move on.
At some point during the party, were you aware that Genesis had to make a phone call?
That's what I heard. Yeah.
And you don't know the details of that phone call, right?
No, I didn't. I don't know the details of that phone call.
And in fact, you don't even know if Genesis had to make a phone call, correct?
I mean, I guess not.
Later that night, Genesis was throwing up in the restroom because she drank too much alcohol, correct?
Yes.
And the next day you observed Casey and Genesis, correct?
Yes.
Genesis mentioned owing Harper an apology. Is that also right?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
A response, counsel.
Withdraw that question.
All right, let's move on.
To be clear, you were having a really bad hangover that morning, right?
Which morning?
The morning after the party.
The one at the Black Bear Casino?
The morning that you found out Genesis's condition.
Oh, okay. Yes, I did have a hangover that morning. Yeah.
Okay. So this rehearsal dinner took place June 7th, 2019, right?
Yes.
And speeches were being given that night as well, right?
Yes.
When Genesis gave her speech, you didn't remember much of it, right?
I don't remember much of it, no, because I was drinking.
So is it possible that Genesis could have talked about Harper?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Response.
This isn't speculation because the witness was present at that situation. So using present sense impressions, the witness could make an astute observation of the event that happened, which was Genesis talking at the party. So it's
Your
not.
Honor, may I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, my witness has just said that she was intoxicated that night and she doesn't remember much of it. So any comment that she makes about anything that Genesis said would be speculation since she wasn't in the proper mindset.
I think your witness can use her knowledge to answer whether she knows. So I'm going to overrule the objection. You can re-ask your question.
Yes.
Your Honor.
So is it possible that Genesis could have talked about Harper, correct?
It's possible, but I just remember the speeches being really beautiful. I don't remember any particular thing that was said.
And around 10 p.m. that night, Harper also gave a toast to Genesis, right?
Yes.
It was a kind gesture, right?
It was. Honestly, I would have been so moved had I not seen Genesis so scared earlier.
Well, during that toast, Harper presented Genesis and the rest of the guests a gift, right?
Yes. We all got bottles of wine.
And Harper gave the Cara wine bottle to Genesis in front of everyone, correct?
Yes.
Genesis was also relieved by this gesture, right?
He was, yeah.
Later that evening, you observed Genesis drinking several glasses of Cara wine, right?
Yes.
And you took a sip of this Cara wine that was gifted to Genesis, correct?
I did, but I spit out every last drop. It was absolutely disgusting.
So you're saying that you spit it out because it didn't suit your taste, correct?
Yes.
Okay, moving on. At 10:45 p.m., you and Genesis were drinking together as usual, right?
Yes.
And Genesis ordered tequila shots for everyone.
Yes. But I didn't see him drink any tequila.
So you're not aware that Genesis drank any tequila that night, correct?
No, he ordered the shots, but I didn't personally see him take any tequila shots.
So to be clear, you don't exactly have a clear memory of Genesis's alcohol consumption that night, right?
I mean, no, I'm not exactly his babysitter, but I generally understand about how much alcohol he drank.
But to clarify, you did notice that Genesis had a lack of coordination and slurred speech, right?
I did, and it wasn't really like anything I'd ever seen from Genesis before. Like I'd seen him drink so much more alcohol without even getting a hangover, and that night it just seemed really, really off compared to the amount of alcohol I'd seen him drink.
So these are signs of being drunk, correct? Slurred speech, stumbled movements. Those
They are.
signs of being drunk. Okay. And
Yeah.
Genesis also started vomiting, correct? Later that night?
Yes.
And this is not the first time you've seen Genesis throw up from drinking, correct?
No, it's not.
Okay. Well, let's move to June 8th, 2019. At 8 a.m., Genesis had slipped into a coma due to some kind of poisoning, right?
The doctor said likely due to some kind of pesticide poisoning.
And you went back to Peony Estates, right?
Yes.
And is it fair to assume you were also maybe a little hungover from the night before, considering you drank multiple drinks?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's just rewind a bit, okay? So, Ms. Rodriguez, the times you recounted today, you were drunk with speaking to Genesis and Harper, correct?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't really understand.
Sorry. So during this whole cross, you were drunk when speaking to Genesis and Harper, correct? That's a fact that we've already established throughout this cross.
Yes.
And is it true that when you're drunk, your memory isn't reliable?
I'm not exactly a doctor, but to my knowledge, I guess.
So it's possible that your story has a lot of gaps in it due to memory loss from drinking alcohol on those days.
It's possible, but I've communicated everything that I remember from that night.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions. At this time, I pass the witness.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just ask that my witness be allowed to step down now.
Ms. Rodriguez, you may step down and you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, plaintiff calls Dr. Kwan to the stand.
Right. You may proceed.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Dr. Kwan.
What is your occupation, Dr. Kwan?
Currently, I work as the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital in Midlands.
Can you explain to us what a chief ER physician is?
Yeah, so I'm tasked with quickly and accurately diagnosing patients who enter the emergency room.
Do you specialize in toxicology?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what toxicology is?
Toxicology is the branch of science where we're concerned with like the nature, effects, and detection of poisons. So while I treat all patients as a chief ER physician, I am usually given the suspected poisoning cases.
Would you share with us and the jury your educational background, beginning with college?
Yeah, so I received my BS in biology with a minor in chemistry at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Then I went on to receive my medical degree at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And then I completed my residency at Emory's Department of Emergency Medicine. And after the residency is where I decided to remain at Emory to complete my fellowship.
Are you board certified in emergency medicine, toxicology, and critical care medicine?
Yes.
And how many years have you been treating people in emergency medicine and toxicology?
About 17.
So, Dr. Kwan, what procedures and resources did you utilize in writing your report?
Well, I had to use my own personal education, experience, and expertise in emergency medicine and toxicology to examine Genesis. And I used the available results from the initial tests and the toxicology report I had conducted to come to my conclusions and create the report.
Is this a standard practice in your field?
Yes.
And does this practice provide sufficient facts and data for you to reach a conclusion in your report with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
And did you reliably apply your principles and methods to the facts of this case today?
Yes.
So, Dr. Kwan, let's start. When did you initially encounter Genesis Petrillo?
I first encountered them when they were brought into the hospital by their friend Angel Rodriguez.
And can you describe your initial inspections of Genesis Petrillo?
Yeah, when Petrillo came in, they were vomiting and they smelled of wine. I could tell they were definitely intoxicated.
And was Petrillo responsive at the time?
I did attempt to speak with Petrillo about their symptoms, but they did have trouble responding.
And did Petrillo mention anything about their symptoms?
While their speech was slurred, they were able to convey to me that they had stomach cramps and some tightness in their chest. Petrillo also had stated that they were drinking a lot of wine that evening, and their appearance of their vomit did validate that story. It appeared a dark red color and it smelled acidic and alcoholic.
And upon your initial observation, what did Petrillo's symptoms indicate?
Symptoms were nausea, vomiting, slurred speech, stomach pain, and breathing. That's somewhat slower than normal for an average adult. It indicated alcohol poisoning to me.
And did you complete a full examination upon Petrillo's admittance to the hospital?
Yes.
And what did the examination consist of?
I took Petrillo's vitals and collected and examined samples of the vomit.
And are these methods reliable and consistent with the proper medical standards that you have been taught?
Of course.
And did this examination happen to change your initial diagnosis of what Genesis Petrillo was suffering from?
Definitely. It happened, a few things stood out to me that made me believe that it was definitely something else other than alcohol poisoning. First, alcohol poisoning usually causes dilated pupils.
Objection, Your Honor.
What is your objection?
Under Rule 702, testimony by expert witness, Dr. Kwan has not fulfilled prong C under 702, saying that the testimony must be a product of reliable methods and principles. Dr. Kwan has used Angel Rodriguez's affidavit to come to these conclusions, which is inadmissible hearsay.
Response, counsel? I'm sorry, were you done?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Response from plaintiff's counsel?
Your Honor, we've already established all four parts of 702A, B, and C, and D, where the methods that Dr. Kwan proved were through his educational background and 17 years of experience. The methods that he used in his report include the toxicology report and the initial test results. Insofar as he hasn't admitted to anything about using Angel Rodriguez's report in the facts that have been stated today, we're not really using, it shouldn't be considered inadmissible in the first place.
Response, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Kwan has not fulfilled prong B then, because Rule 702 states that he outlined the sufficient facts and data used to come to these conclusions, and Dr. Kwan has used Angel's affidavit per their affidavit.
I'm going to overrule that objection, but you can certainly, if you have concerns about specific hearsay statements, you can certainly re-urge it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes.
So after realizing that it wasn't alcohol poisoning, what then did you do?
I started to suspect that Petrillo may have ingested something toxic or other than alcohol, like an organophosphate poison. So I ordered a poisons and toxins analysis in addition to my already toxicology report.
And can you explain to us and the jury, what are organophosphate poisons?
These are poisons commonly found in insecticides, and they can be very dangerous to humans.
And why would these poisons be considered dangerous?
They inhibit the production of an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, which causes a whole nervous system to fail.
And were you able to conclude how Petrillo came into contact with organophosphate poison?
Yeah, so with my examination, Petrillo's scan showed no evidence of coming into contact with the poison. And with the order and time frame in which Petrillo's symptoms appeared, they were inconsistent with either contact poisoning or the inhalation poisoning. So as a result, I assumed it was ingested.
And can you tell us the telltale signs of exposure to organophosphate poison?
Low acetylcholinesterase is very closely related with organophosphate pesticide exposure. So doctors will use this to factor conclusively and diagnose organophosphate poisoning.
And can you tell us how dangerous are organophosphates to humans when ingested?
Yeah, so when ingested, the organophosphates will begin to cause digestive symptoms, including nausea and vomiting. And as the poison is absorbed further, it begins to affect the nervous system and cause other symptoms such as contracted pupils and excessive tearing, which I saw in Petrillo. And in severe cases, the poisons can cause muscle spasms and incontinence, seizures, and respiratory constriction. These symptoms can often lead to death if they're not treated quickly enough.
And after you realized the severity of the case, then what did you do?
I immediately decided it was time that we administer the antidote because, as I said before, time was of the essence. It is extremely dangerous. And I also asked the lab to run an acetylcholinesterase test in addition to the testing I already ordered.
And did you note Petrillo's preliminary cause of death?
Yes, I did. I noted that it was cause of death was respiratory failure due to pesticide poisoning.
So let's talk about the actual test itself. Before you received the test results, why did you believe this was a case of organophosphate pesticide poisoning?
Well, it was just the progression of Petrillo's reported symptoms perfectly matched the expected progression of pesticide poisoning. When a person ingests the pesticides, they exhibit the digestive symptoms, the contracted pupils, the severe central nervous system failures, like the involuntary muscle movements, the seizures, and unconsciousness following and leading to the death in severe cases.
And when did you receive the initial test results in the toxicology report?
Shortly after Petrillo's death.
Would you recognize the blood alcohol concentration if shown to you in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel and the witness with the pre-admitted Exhibit 5.
You may.
Can you screen share that, please? So what does the blood alcohol content of 0.16% indicate?
So it would indicate that they are going to have some symptoms of like feeling from drinking the alcohol, but it's definitely not going to be any severe symptoms.
And what blood alcohol level typically causes death, seizures, or other serious symptoms?
Anywhere from kind of 2.5, we start seeing kind of like some severe symptoms, but then it's more 0.35 to 0.5 is where we start seeing really severe issues. And
so, Dr. Kwan, what is your final diagnosis of Petrillo's death?
My final diagnosis would be that it was definitely organophosphate poisoning.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Kwan, you are on the board of directors of Doctors for Organic Solutions, correct?
Yes.
That's an organization that advocates against the use of chemical pesticides, correct?
Yes.
You hope that the case today will help convince legislators to ban the use of chemical pesticides, right?
Yeah, because as we saw here, it's extremely dangerous.
Dr. Kwan, your affiliation with Doctors for Organic Solutions is not listed on your CV, right?
Correct.
Dr. Kwan, you also published an article on the devastating economic impacts of chemical pesticides in 2012, right?
Yeah, I'm just extremely concerned about the use of pesticides.
Now, Dr. Kwan, I would like to talk more about your diagnosis. When Genesis Petrillo arrived to the hospital, she smelled of wine and appeared intoxicated, correct?
Yes.
Petrillo stated that she had drunk a lot of wine that evening, right?
Yeah.
Her vomit corroborated with that account, as it was red in color and smelled acidic and alcoholic, correct?
Yes.
And Petrillo's symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, slurred speech, stomach pain, and slowed breathing were all consistent with alcohol poisoning, correct?
Yes, but the alcohol poisoning wouldn't have led to death.
Now, we will go into that. Dr. Kwan, I want to talk about Genesis blood alcohol content, or BAC. Results from testing revealed that Genesis BAC was 0.16, correct?
Yes.
Now, Dr. Kwan, you are aware that time delays can impact testing results, correct?
I don't think that with the time frame given that there would have been a significant decrease of the blood alcohol content level.
Dr. Kwan, I need a simple yes or no. Are you aware that time delays can impact testing results?
They can, and it's seen that sometimes it's increased, if anything, after a longer period of time.
So that's a yes, correct?
Yes.
Dr. Kwan, you even published an article titled The Impact of Testing Delays on Emergency Medicine, correct?
Yes.
Dr. Kwan, you are aware that Genesis's blood sample was drawn nearly 2 hours after that initial 911 call, correct?
Yes, we drew it as quickly as we could.
You are aware of cases of a 0.22 BAC being fatal, right?
Those are outlier cases, and they're outliers for a reason. It's almost rare that it ever happens. It needs to be usually above 0.35 and closer to 0.5 in order for it to be fatal.
But you're aware of certain cases of a 0.22 BAC being fatal. Yes or no, Dr. Kwan?
Outliers, yes.
Dr. Kwan, I want to talk about the pesticide found in Genesis' stomach contents. It's impossible to measure the specific amount of organophosphates a patient has ingested, correct?
It's not possible to test the amount of organophosphate, no.
Now, Dr. Kwan, it's also unsurprising that wine was found in Genesis' stomach contents, right?
No, he'd been drinking, supposedly.
Dr. Kwan, due to the digestion process, it is impossible to pinpoint which wine or even drink contained that organophosphate, correct?
No, I just know that there was organophosphate.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. At this time, I pass the witness.
You redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Right, the witness may step down and you may call your final witness.
Your Honor, if I may call Casey Soda to the stand.
All right. You can proceed.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Casey Soto. My mom is Harper Martini, and Genesis Petrillo was my fiance.
Are you testifying voluntarily today?
I asked everyone to leave me out of this lawsuit a million times, but I was subpoenaed by the plaintiff to testify today.
I know this may be painful to talk about, but how did you and Genesis meet?
In May of 2012, I met Genesis at Rosie and Pedro's winery through one of our mutual friends, and we started dating about a month later. The next few years were really perfect, actually, and Genesis proposed in July of 2018.
When did Harper and Genesis first meet?
I waited until we were more serious to introduce Genesis to Harper. After we'd been dating for about 3 years, in 2015, I brought Genesis home for dinner right after Harper opened Peony Estates.
How did that dinner go?
Well, Harper offered Genesis some of the family wine, and Genesis asked if Harper had anything classier, but it was completely my fault for not mentioning to Genesis that Harper owned Peony Estates.
How did Harper react to this comment?
That was just the beginning of the bad blood between them. Ever since that night, Harper would always complain that Genesis didn't respect Harper's work, and from then on, I just made sure that the two of them weren't together very often. But that wasn't very easy with the wedding planning.
You mentioned it wasn't easy when she got involved with the wedding planning. What was Harper's role in the wedding planning?
Well, Harper wasn't super involved at first until she offered to pay for a really huge portion of the wedding if we just agreed to host it at Peony Estates.
Was Harper aware of your plan to move to France with Genesis at this point?
Harper didn't know about that until May 11th of 2019. That was the night that we had our pre-wedding party, and we went to a casino and had a little bit too much fun, and then Harper found out that we were planning to move to France.
What was Harper's opinion of this?
Harper's always been really protective of me, and she was really upset. Harper told Genesis to reconsider the plans and that I can't abandon Harper and that I need to stay in Midlands and run Peony Estates.
How did you feel about your fiance and Harper's relationship at this point?
Well, it was extremely difficult to see the extent of all of that bad blood between them. I felt really torn between the two sides, but I made it clear to Genesis that I would go wherever our relationship went, regardless of how Harper felt.
Now, moving forward a little bit, tell me about the day of June 7th, 2019.
Everything was going smooth. The guests were arriving for our rehearsal dinner. Everyone had some time to cool down about the whole France situation, but then Harper snapped at Genesis for arriving a few minutes late to the rehearsal and was saying that he shouldn't have even bothered to show up.
How did this conflict between the two of them affect you?
I mean, my wedding, it was supposed to be the perfect day, you know, that I'd always imagined, but all of that drama made me consider calling the whole thing off. Genesis said that he understood and was concerned that Harper might try to embarrass or even hurt him.
Did you ever tell Harper about these thoughts of calling off the wedding?
Yeah, I did, and Harper was ecstatic about thinking about calling it off, saying that all I needed to do was give the word. Harper went on and on about how I should stay in Midlands and run Peony Estates and that Genesis was breaking up our family. But I made it clear that I was going to France.
How did the rest of that night go?
Better for the most part. Around 10 p.m., Harper gave a surprisingly sweet toast to Genesis, and she gave him a special bottle of Cara wine.
Did you drink any of this Cara wine?
No, I didn't.
Now, the following morning, how are you notified about Genesis?
Well, I was getting ready around 7 a.m. And then an hour later, Harper came in and told me that Genesis was missing. I was sure that Genesis was going to turn up, but Harper insisted that he'd bailed and that we should postpone my ceremony. And then a little after 8:30, I heard that Genesis was in a coma.
I know this may be hard to talk about, but what did you do once finding out about the news?
I went straight to the hospital, of course, but I got there about 5 minutes after Genesis died.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Again, Ms. Soto, I'm sorry for your loss. I know it must be difficult to speak about this. So Harper raised you alone, correct?
Yes.
And in your opinion, Harper was very hardworking yet still made time for school events.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my mom was at every single soccer game I had, everything that she could manage to be at, she was there.
And you would agree that Harper is well-intentioned, correct?
Yeah, she's done her best for me as much as she can so far.
And it didn't seem like Harper would go as far as to hurt Genesis, is that correct?
I mean, I don't really know what to think at this point. I never want to think that about my mom, of course, but there's just been a lot of tension, you know?
After Harper and Genesis' first meeting, would you say that their encounter put a splinter in their relationship?
Yeah, that first meeting went really poorly.
And as a child, Harper always told you that she dreamed of having your wedding at Peony Estates, is that right?
Yeah, she did.
And she was very hands-on with the wedding and even offered to fund a portion of it, is that correct?
Yes, she did.
Now, Harper played a voicemail she received from Genesis, right?
Do you mean when she found out about France?
Yes.
Yes.
Would you recognize a copy of that voicemail's transcript if I showed it in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I share Exhibit 8, which is pre-admitted constructively outside of the view of the jury?
Yes.
Mr. Shajan, can we get Exhibit 8 on the screen? Ms. Soto, this is a true and correct copy of the transcript of that voicemail as you last observed it, correct?
Yes, it is.
And it hasn't been altered in any way?
No.
Could you read the highlighted lines, please?
Okay. Casey, me, our future kids, your grandkids, we're all going to live our lives as far away from you as possible, and you'll never see any of us. You'll die alone at that sad place, and no one will care.
In that voicemail, in your own words, would you say that Genesis said some cruel things and told Harper your plans to move out of the country, correct?
Yes.
And this was the first time Harper ever heard about your plans of moving to France, is that right?
That's correct.
And Harper expressed that she thought Genesis didn't respect her, your family, and was a bad influence, is that right?
She did think that, yeah.
And at the rehearsal dinner, Harper made a big show of showing the bottle of Cara wine, presenting it to Genesis in front of all of the attendees, is that right?
Yes.
Harper also showed off the custom label that said "This is for you," correct?
The label on the bottle, yes.
And Harper seemed sincere to you, is that right?
Yeah, it was sweet to watch, especially compared to everything that I'd seen between the two of them for basically our whole relationship up to that point.
And you saw Genesis pour multiple glasses of wine, is that right?
Yes.
And you do not know for sure who might have drank from the other glasses, is that right?
No, I don't know who they were for, but Genesis, he's always been a drinker, so it really wouldn't surprise me if both of them were for him.
Yes, but you do not know for sure if anyone else had drinking from that bottle and the glasses poured.
No, I'm not sure.
And you ate and drank everything else that Genesis had, correct?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I'll just like to ask if my witness can step down.
The witness may step down. Do you have any additional witnesses to call at this time?
No, Your Honor.
Does the plaintiff rest?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, we will now take a 5-minute break. Please remember that this video is being publicly broadcast via YouTube live stream. I'll see y'all again in about 5 minutes. Do we have everyone back and ready to proceed?
The plaintiff is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Defense counsel, are your team members ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's go ahead and proceed with the defense case in chief. You may call your first witness.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand.
Okay, you can proceed.
Could you please state your name for the court?
Hi, my name is Blair Osborne.
What is your occupation, Ms. Osborne?
So I work as a private event planner here in Rapid River Valley. I'm also the CEO, CFO, and all other executive roles as founder and proud owner of Bliss by Blair Events.
Can you tell us about your educational background, Ms. Osborne?
Sure, I received a certificate completion from Midland State University's MBA preparatory course, which basically means I have a good grasp of small business ownership.
As an event planner, what experiences do you have planning events, Ms. Osborne?
Oh, lots of it. I arrange conferences, birthday parties, anniversaries, retirement parties. You name it, I planned it. But I'm known first and foremost as an excellent wedding planner. Savior magazine even named Bliss by Blair Events the #1 most highly recommended event planning service across the Rapid River Valley area for 4 different years.
Congratulations. What brings you here today, Ms. Osborne?
So I'm here voluntarily because I planned the wedding and the associated matrimonial events of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo in 2019. I was also there at Peony Estates on the night Genesis became ill and, unfortunately passed away.
Do you know Harper Martini, Ms. Osborne?
Yes, I do.
How did you come to know Ms. Martini?
Well, I first met Harper in 2015 when Peony Estates came to my rescue. As a new rookie event planner, I'll admit I was a bit of a mess. One day I found myself with 2 events, both booked for the same place at the same time. I desperately needed an alternate venue, and I called every nearby location I could think of before Harper saved the day and told us to come on over to Peony Estates.
Did you continue working with Harper Martini after that initial event?
Yes, of course.
How long have you and Ms. Martini been business partners?
That event was so successful that we ended up creating a partnership between Bliss by Blair Events and Peony Estates that would last for the next 4 years. I've hosted 61 weddings, 12 birthday parties, 9 corporate luncheons, and 1 funeral wake at Peony Estates. What can I say? I enjoy being business partners with Harper.
What was the most recent event you hosted at Peony Estates?
Well, it was supposed to be the wedding of Casey and Genesis, but unfortunately that didn't take place.
How do you normally begin planning an event as big as this?
So I like to host a meeting to discuss the initial details and the vision for it all. So I had the meeting with Casey and Genesis, which of course Harper arranged.
What was discussed during this meeting?
Well, we discussed the rehearsal dinner, the wedding ceremony, and the wedding reception.
How well would you say this meeting went, Ms. Osborne?
Overall, the meeting went quite well. It was pretty pleasant. Casey seemed happy, of my work because we strongly agreed on the vision for the wedding.
Did you experience any complications as the event planning took place?
Yeah, there were some complications as with any wedding planning. It's very stressful. It consumes a lot of people's energy. And I noticed Harper and Genesis weren't getting along too well, but it was easy to calm them down since they didn't want to be near each other, since they were arguing.
Now, I'd like to talk about the wedding rehearsal that took place on June 7, 2019. Did anything significant happen?
Yeah, Harper seemed more than ready to smooth things out with Genesis. She presented this beautiful bottle of wine in front of the entire group. I'll admit, the gesture even made me tear up a bit. And I don't even consider myself that emotional.
What took place later that night, Ms. Osborne? Ms. Osborne, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm sorry. What took place later that night?
Well, by midnight, most of the guests went to sleep, but Genesis and Angel would stay at the one of the cocktail stations we'd set up. They would have kept me at Peony Estates all night if they could. I knew Genesis had been drinking. I can't tell you how much exactly he had been drinking, but I ended up telling Angel and Genesis to drink some water before they went to bed, and then I left.
The next morning at around 7:15, what did you see?
I saw Harper, drinking some coffee as she watched the decorators set things up.
Were there any bumps that took place that morning?
Oh, yeah, everything went downhill that morning. Harper was excited to get on with the day. I mean, she told me she wanted the wedding to be perfect for Casey. But of course, when we went to knock on Genesis and Angel's doors, they didn't respond, and we realized they were missing.
How did Harper react to this news?
Harper appeared deeply concerned and swore if Genesis is throwing up in some gutters, she'll never let Genesis hear the end of it.
Did this reaction shock you?
No, because I was aware that Harper would want Casey and Genesis' wedding day to be perfect since she poured all her money, her energy, and her love into this wedding. She seemed like she wanted, she seemed like she was very caught off guard. And I mean, so was I. And her reaction was understandable on such an important day for her and her daughter.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Osborne, is it true that you heard a drunken voicemail from Genesis to Harper during one of your meetings?
Yes, that's true.
And it was Harper's response was, quote, one of these days Genesis will drink the wrong thing and it will kill Genesis?
Yeah, but honestly, it seemed to me Harper was just worried about Genesis getting alcohol poisoning one day from drinking too carelessly.
Thank you. And after hearing this, wouldn't you say it appeared that Harper knew what was going to happen?
I don't understand what you're asking me.
I mean, where we stand today as an end result, couldn't you see that Harper was foreshadowing what was going to happen?
No,
Your Honor,
didn't see that.
Speculation.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the hindsight 2020, I'm just asking for the rationally based perception.
Remind me of your question.
Your Honor, I'm just asking if she felt like there was any foreshadowing going on with this voicemail from Harper.
What's your response, counsel?
Your Honor, Ms. Osborne cannot testify to what Harper was thinking during that time. That would be speculating her mindset during that time.
I'm going to sustain the objection. You can go or move on.
Yes, Your Honor. Now let's go to the night of the rehearsal dinner. You saw Genesis being given a bottle of Carl wine as a gift from Harper, correct?
Oh yeah, it was beautiful.
And you heard Harper request Genesis to drink it alone?
Yeah, I mean, people love to reflect on their path to marriage. This is definitely a beautiful journey, so I get why she told her to reflect.
Ms. Osborne, you felt that this was an odd request, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it was phrased a little weird.
A couple other questions here. You have hosted numerous weddings and parties at the estates, right?
Oh, for sure. It's very beautiful there.
And just not at Peony Estates, you have hosted several other venues and had a chance to view their standards.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You've hosted at several other venues and got to experience how they operate. Is that right?
Sure.
And you know the estate's grounds well then, Peony Estate grounds.
Oh, I've been there quite a few times, yes.
Is it true that you saw Peony Estates to be the most hygienic venue you have hosted at?
The place is spotless.
And with it being the most hygienic venue, it'd be more probable than not that pesticide contamination would be intentional?
I don't believe so. I mean, Harper would never do that to Casey.
So with it being the most hygienic place that you've ever worked at, you see that there is a chance for cross-contamination
Cross-contamination?
between pesticide and the wine? Yes.
Are you saying that's intentional?
I'm asking you, with it being the most hygienic place you've worked at, would it be more probable or not that if there's any pesticide that made it into the wine, it would have to be intentional?
I honestly don't believe so.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked my witness to be allowed to step down.
Your witness may step down and you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Austin Lewis to the stand. Can you introduce yourself, Ms. Lewis?
Hello, my name is Austin Lewis, and I make wine for a living.
And how do you know Miss Martini?
Harper and I met while working at Rosie and Pedro, and we became quick friends. So much so, she even offered me a job and 10% stake in the company.
And Ms. Lewis, what is your relationship like with Miss Martini?
I would say Harper and I have a great friendship. I'm basically her right-hand woman.
And as Martini's friend, what can you tell me about Harper's personality?
Well, Harper can be a bit of a drama queen when it comes to family matters, but she really opened up the door when she made me head winemaker. No one's ever believed in me like that. She was also pro-environment and tried to use natural products when it came to maintaining our winery until the pesticide problem.
And how did Casey and Harper's relationship seem to you?
Casey was Harper's only child. She put a lot of effort into Casey and into planning the wedding. She even offered to pay for Casey's wedding. To me, it seemed like Harper loved Casey.
Did it seem like Harper would intentionally poison someone?
Well, did it seem like Harper would intentionally poison someone? No. Harper was one of the kindest, most loving people I've ever met. I know she made some off-the-cuff remarks about Genesis, but who hasn't said some nice, nasty things about their in-laws?
And why do you think Harper wouldn't have done such a thing to Genesis despite disliking her?
Well, Harper really loved Casey, and she wouldn't want to hurt him. Like I said before, she even invested so much effort and time and money into making sure their wedding was the best one yet. Not to mention, Harper had to bury her husband, and I'm sure she wouldn't want to do the same thing to her only child.
Are you aware that there was a bottle of Cara wine in the trash that contained pesticides?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And could you tell me how those pesticides could have gotten there?
So a few days preceding the wedding, we did a little spraying. We didn't want any nasty pests ruining the occasion. We had a little extra pesticide left over, and just to make sure everything was safe, we threw it away. I'm sure that's how the bottle got contaminated. I can't see how the bottle could have been contaminated before Genesis drank it.
Can you tell me why the bottle could not have been contaminated before Genesis drank it?
Yes, I personally supervise every spraying. I'm not aware of a single occasion in which any of the pesticide or container leaked or spilled. And I always told our employees before every spraying to tell me if either of those things happened. On top of that, the health inspector sampled 20 of our wines during 2018 and didn't find unsafe levels of pesticide in any of them. Plus, not one of our employees, except the one who got sick, ever got sick.
And may you remind the court why you are here today?
Yes, I'm here today to testify in the case of Harper Martini versus Genesis Petrio's estate.
Now, Ms. Lewis, based on what you know, what is your conclusion regarding this case?
Well, it is my humble conclusion that Harper Martini would never poison Genesis. Harper was one of the kindest, most loving people I've ever met. She really cared about Casey. She put so much time and effort into Casey, planning his wedding just to make sure it was the most perfect day of his life. And the notion that Harper would kill someone is just outrageous to me. I just can't fathom it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Cross-examination?
May I begin, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
So, Miss Riley, you started working for Harper Martini in 2015, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Harper Martini offered you a 10% share in the company to work there, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you still own 10% of Peony Estates, right?
Yes, I do.
And you prefer that Harper Martini win this case, correct?
I mean, yes, I prefer Harper win this case, but that's because I think she's innocent. Knowing Harper personally, I don't think she's
Objection, Your
capable of
Honor.
such.
Narrative.
Any response?
Your Honor, the witness is simply answering the question and explaining their reasonings behind it.
Um, I'm going to overrule that objection. You can proceed.
So personally, knowing Casey, I don't think she would do such a thing.
You acknowledge that the winery will be closed down if the defendant loses this lawsuit, correct?
Yes, I did.
And that you'll be out of the job?
Well, since I own 10% of the stakes, I don't really think I'd be out of a job per se.
Is that the statement you'd like to make in court today?
I would, on second thought, yeah, I think I would be out of a job if it did close down.
And you'll lose a lot of money?
Yes, I would lose quite a bit of money if it closed down.
Your Honor, asked and answered, the witness has answered multiple times that they own a 10% stake and that this case would affect their employment.
Any response?
Your Honor, it's a completely different question. I'm asking whether if owning 10% would affect their actual income itself.
I'm going to overrule the objection. You can proceed.
And losing the estates is the last thing you want to happen, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you volunteered to testify today, right?
I did volunteer to testify today, yes.
On behalf of Harper Martini?
I volunteered on behalf of the case.
So, Ms. Riley, you're familiar with Genesis Petrillo, correct?
Yes, quite familiar. We're basically best friends.
And Martini has spoken about Genesis with you?
Yeah, but she really just said things because she thought Genesis was maybe not too great for her son.
Harper Martini specifically told you that she hated Genesis, right?
Yes, but again, those were spoken because she thought Genesis was not too great for her son.
And Martini told you this multiple times, correct?
Objection, hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This statement will be considered an exception to hearsay under Rule 801 D2D, which states that since Ms. Riley is an employee of the actual party opponent, this could be considered an exception to hearsay.
Any response?
Your Honor, per the case America's Greatest Cookies versus the International House of Waffles, these are witnesses' state made out of court and are inadmissible as hearsay regarding any side.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
And Martini said that they wanted the wedding canceled, right?
Yeah, I suppose so, but she really just didn't want Genesis with Casey because she thought Genesis was no good.
Harper Martini wanted Genesis to disappear, correct?
Disappear is a bit of a strong word. I just think that Harper was just saying things about her in-laws like we all have said.
But she specifically mentioned the word disappear, correct?
Yeah, but just like I said before, Harper's a bit dramatic.
And the statement that she specifically mentioned, did she mention that if I could push a button and make Genesis disappear, I would absolutely do it?
Yes, but like I said before, Harper's just a bit of a drama queen. She's always saying crazy things like that.
But she has mentioned this multiple times, correct, Ms. Riley?
Well, in that instance, she only said that statement once.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that my witness be excused from the stand.
You may be excused and you may call your final witness.
The defense calls Harper Martini to the stand. Hello, Miss Martini. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Hello, would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Harper Martini. I'm a self-made businesswoman, a widower, but most importantly, I'm the mother to Casey Soto.
What is most important to you?
I'm a small business owner, but above all else, I'm Casey Soto's mom. Casey's well-being and happiness is what is the most important thing in my life. Ever since my husband died, Casey has always been the apple of my eyes.
Why is family so important to you?
Family isn't just something that's important, it's everything to me. What's the point of going through life without having some people to cherish it with? Personally, when I think of home, I don't think of a physical location. Instead, I see the faces of my child and my late
Objection,
husband.
Your Honor, narrative.
Response, counsel?
Your Honor, Ms. Martini is simply just answering the question. There's no narrative in that. It's just an answer.
I feel like the testimony is going on for a little bit, a little while though. If you could break up your questions a little bit, I'm going to sustain the objection.
Ms. Martini, how did you meet Genesis Petrillo?
Casey brought Genesis to Peony Estates in 2015 for me to meet him. I found out later that they were dating.
And how did that first interaction go?
Well, Genesis made fun of my business, something that I'm very proud about, and it really hurt my feelings. But even worse, Casey laughed about it.
What do you think of their relationship overall?
Well, in business, you have to have thick skin. You can't take things too personally. However, it's one thing to deal with an unpleasant person at work, and it's another completely different thing to have an unpleasant trying to sabotage your family's family livelihood. Look, I honestly believe that the way Genesis treated Casey is ultimately why I had such a terrible relationship with Genesis to begin with. The snobby remarks about my
Objection,
business
Your
I
Honor,
could
narrative.
swallow.
Any response,
Your Honor.
counsel?
Your Honor, we'll just withdraw that question and move on.
All right, let's move on. Thank you.
Is Genesis a bad influence on Casey?
Yes,
Objection,
I
Your Honor,
remember.
speculation.
Your Honor, I'm just simply asking Ms. Martini to use her own present sense situation when she met Genesis to just respond to the question and give an answer.
Response, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Asking the witness whether Genesis was a bad influence is not something that Harper Martini can testify to specifically without speculating whether she thinks someone's intentions are good or bad.
I'll overrule the objection for now.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Martini, you seem to feel very strongly about Genesis, but to be clear, would you ever harm Genesis?
Absolutely not. Anyone can tell you that Genesis Petrillo was not my favorite person in the world, but I'm pretty sure everyone can also attest to they're not going to be ignorant enough to think that I could harm another person. After all, Genesis was Casey's love. I would do anything to protect Casey, especially from the pain that I had to go through when I was burying my husband.
Ms. Martini, was there ever an instance in which Genesis put Casey in harm's way?
Yes, I remember on Casey's 24th birthday, Genesis made some ridiculous drinking bet with Casey that ultimately sent her to the hospital with alcohol poisoning. My Casey could have died. After that incident, it made it very clear that Genesis really had no sense of how much alcohol is too much. That night just served as another reason why I couldn't trust Genesis.
Now, I'd like to talk about the months leading up to the wedding. Were you in contact with Genesis at that time?
Yes, we had to plan the wedding, of course. Genesis made it very clear he didn't like me, even left a drunken voicemail on my phone the month before the wedding. It was quite hurtful, to say the least.
Ms. Martini, would you recognize a transcript of the voicemail Genesis left you a month before the wedding?
Yes.
Your Honor, may we share a screen to show Exhibit 8?
Yes.
Mr. Shajan, can we get Exhibit 8 on the screen? And Ms. Martini, is this a true and correct copy of the voicemail transcript as you heard it on May 12th, 2019?
Yes.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Not that I can see.
And Ms. Martini, would you mind reading aloud lines 9 through 10 and the last sentence, please? That's highlighted right here.
Yes. Casey, me, our future kids,
Objection, Your Honor,
grandkids.
needlessly cumulative.
Your Honor, we're simply just asking Ms. Martini to reread an exhibit that was already previously put in the trial. There's nothing wrong with this. We're just asking for Ms. Martini to read this voicemail.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, this exhibit right here is available for the jury to look at during their own time when they're deliberating. And so reading out the exact statements in this document is redundant and needlessly cumulative, and it's just wasting the court's time.
I'm going to overrule the objection since this is a different witness than the state was previously used with. You can proceed.
And Ms. Martini, how did these words make you feel?
Well, after my husband died, I poured myself into two things, my work and my child. I've dedicated my whole life to Casey. So how would you feel if someone was just trying to bash you in every single way? I was heartbroken, especially coming from someone as snobby as Genesis.
And what did you do after you heard these words from Genesis?
I returned the favor. I called up Genesis the next day and let Genesis know that there is nothing I wouldn't do to protect my child.
Did this voicemail or the call make you want to harm Genesis in any way?
Like I said, I was angry and I realized that I shouldn't have snooped down to Genesis level, and I know that. But I would absolutely never harm anyone, even if it was Genesis. After I cooled down, I decided that it was in everyone's best interest just to let it go.
Was there anything that made you decide to let this feud between you and Genesis go?
Casey, 100%. In fact, the night before the wedding rehearsal, Casey asked if we could go out to the patio and have some wine, and I agreed.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Any response?
Your Honor, my client here hasn't even been able to state what she was going to say. So on those grounds, would you allow our client to just finish her response?
No, not if she's about to testify to hearsay. Do you have a response to the hearsay objection?
Yes. So this is simply just what my client heard in that present sense. And that is an exception to hearsay because it's a present sense situation.
I'm going to sustain the objection. You can move on.
Okay. Ms. Martini, what did you do to make sure that Casey had the perfect wedding day?
Aside from the oversight that I provided to make sure everything was executed seamlessly, I knew that I had to make peace with Genesis once and for all. If this wedding was going to be perfect, we had to make peace at the wedding rehearsal.
And how did you go about making peace at the wedding rehearsal?
Well, there's this beautiful carrot wine, which is a blend of fall spices, currants, and smoked leather, and it's exactly the type of wine that Genesis was into. So I made it a point to give him the first bottle, so that way Genesis, would be the first one to be able to sample it.
And how did the rehearsal dinner go?
I thought it was a resounding success. Genesis and Casey both gave beautiful, heartfelt speeches, and I gave a speech about how blood is thicker than water, or in this case,
Objection,
wine.
Your Honor, hearsay.
Your Honor, this isn't a direct quote. This is merely just a summarization of what my client said at the wedding toast. This isn't a direct quote. This is just a summary of what my client said.
Response?
Your Honor, even if it's just a summarization, it is still pertaining to out-of-court statements, which would still be considered hearsay.
I'll overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
And Ms. Martini, what happened after the rehearsal dinner?
Well, after I gave her or him the bottle of Cara wine, I felt like we had finally put the past behind us. Then I went to bed at around 10:30 p.m. and around 2:30, I had received a panic call from one of my employees saying that someone had been rushed to the hospital.
When you got the call, what did you think happened? What went through your mind?
Well, my first thought that it was Genesis. I thought Genesis might have gotten alcohol poisoning.
And why did you think that Genesis might have gotten alcohol poisoning?
Well, all throughout the wedding rehearsal, I had seen Genesis drinking quite a bit.
Did you do anything after you received the call?
Yes, I went directly to Genesis's room to check on him and to see if he was all right.
And what did you find when you went to Genesis's room?
I know Genesis was in sight, but I did find an empty bottle of Cara wine that I had given him.
What did you do with this bottle once you found it in Genesis's room?
Well, since it was completely empty, I just decided to throw it in the dumpster.
Ms. Martini, you heard in trial today that pesticides were found in this bottle. Do you have an explanation for this?
Yes, it's all just a big misunderstanding. We use a lot of pesticides around the winery, and we are frequently having to throw out those canisters. Oftentimes, they're not completely empty. The contents of these canisters can leak out, and the contaminants may contaminate the dumpster as well.
And what happened after you threw this bottle of wine out?
Well, I went back to bed as I assumed that Genesis had just had a bad case of alcohol poisoning, and I thought that he would be better the following morning.
And what did happen that following morning?
I woke up around 7 a.m. and I immediately started seeing all of the decorations and setting up for the ceremony. I was content and I knew that this day had to be perfect for Casey. It was all finally coming together. As a mother, you always know, you want to know if you're doing the right thing by raising your child. And that morning, I knew I must have.
Now, let me backtrack a bit. You mentioned that Genesis had gone missing the night before. Did you find him the next morning?
Well, I had sent Blair, the wedding planner, to check up on the entire wedding party. As I oversaw the decorations, Blair came back to me and said that Genesis still hadn't returned.
And what were your initial thoughts when you heard that Genesis didn't return that morning?
Admittedly, my protective instincts as a mom kicked in. I freaked out a little bit because I thought Genesis had gotten cold feet or just did something irresponsible. But a little later, though, Angel came from the hospital and told us that Genesis had fallen into a coma.
And what went through your mind when you heard that news about Genesis?
Casey and Angel went to the hospital together to visit, and I stayed behind to help the guests and cancel the plan so that Casey could just solely focus on Genesis. I knew that Casey just needed some alone time to truly grasp what happened, and Angel called a little later to say that Genesis had sadly passed away.
How were you feeling when you heard this news about Genesis's passing?
My heart was truly broken for Casey. Even though I was not the fondest of Genesis, I always wanted to make sure that Casey and Genesis were happy because, you know, Casey is my daughter. And I know firsthand what it's like to suddenly lose a significant other. And as a parent, I would never wish for that to happen to anyone else.
And what do you mean when you said that you wished you could protect Casey from this heartbreak, that you wouldn't want this to happen to someone else?
Well, call me cynical, but I've always had a gut feeling that Genesis' recklessness, lifestyle, and her love of liquor would lead to him drinking the wrong thing and getting hurt. Like I said earlier, it's part of the reason I was so hard on Genesis. It's truly painful to me that I couldn't protect Casey from the same loss that I had to go through.
Thank you. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Harper, you've told Genesis that there is nothing you wouldn't do to protect Casey, correct?
Yes, in a little bit of a rage, I did tell her that.
So much so that you were willing to give Genesis $300,000 before the wedding to bribe him out of the relationship, correct?
Well, I thought that, you know, if she was going to take it, then it would prove that, you know, maybe she wasn't truly in it for the right reasons. But yeah, I did try to, you know, bribe her a little.
And also, you wrote a note to give to Genesis along with the $300,000 in late May 2019, correct?
That is correct.
Would you recognize a copy of this note if shown to you in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, I will now present Exhibit 24. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
Besides the fact that it's a little bit wrinkled, yes.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Like I said, it's wrinkled, but other than that, no.
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to enter Exhibit 24 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 24 is admitted.
Now, Harper, in this note, you told Genesis that if he leaves Casey, then the $300,000 would be his, right?
Correct.
Then you said, otherwise, I will take you out of the picture the hard way, correct?
That is correct.
And then you gave Genesis a deadline of June 7th, the day of the rehearsal dinner, to choose, right?
I mean, all he did was take the money and give me back the note, but he did think about it for a little bit because he returned it on the exact day of the deadline.
Now let's talk about the night of the rehearsal dinner, June 7th, 2019. You had a plan to make at least temporary peace with Genesis, correct?
Can you re-say that again? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes, on the night of the rehearsal dinner, you had a plan to make peace with Genesis, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your response?
Yes, Your Honor, during their direct examination, the witness, Harper Martini themselves, talked about making peace with Genesis the night of the rehearsal dinner. So this statement has already been brought up.
I agree. I'm going to overrule the objection.
But you were irritated with Genesis the night he arrived at the rehearsal dinner, right?
Well, would you show up to your own wedding rehearsal 15 minutes late? I mean, I just thought that was a tad bit careless of him. But, I just brushed it aside because I just wanted the best night for my daughter.
And at that moment, you wanted nothing more than for Genesis to be gone, right?
Well,
Objection, Your Honor. This is another speculation.
What is your response, counsel?
Your Honor, I'm simply asking Harper Martini what she thought of that incident. So it's not speculation. It's me asking her what she believed during that moment.
Any response?
Your Honor, if I may, the attorney on the plaintiff simply asked Harper Martini if she wanted nothing more than for Genesis to be gone. That is a pure speculation on the plaintiff's part to get into the mindset of Harper Martini.
But isn't this Harper Martini?
Well, yes, Your Honor,
So
but
can't Harper Martini talk about Harper Martini's own mindset?
Well, yes, Your Honor, but the plaintiff just seemed to be putting words in my defendant's.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
So, Miss Martini, you wanted nothing more than for Genesis to be gone, right?
Well, on the night of the wedding rehearsal, I was a little bit peeved, but I just wanted to make sure that my promise to Casey was fulfilled. So I just wanted to brush everything aside.
But is that a yes or no to my question?
Like I said, I just decided to brush everything off after, just cooled myself down.
So are you saying that you didn't want Genesis to be gone that night?
I did, but, I put it aside, like all ends meet.
So then next, you went to the kitchen, correct, to put your peace plan in place?
Yes, I decided to call Sam Arnold so that way he could bring out the bottles of wine for the guests and Genesis.
So you went to the bottling area to get a bottle of Cara wine to bring to the main kitchen, correct?
Well, I got Sam Arnold to bring everything out.
Okay, and you intended to give this bottle of Cara wine to Genesis, right?
Yes, Genesis just really likes those complex flavors of wine. So I just thought this would be the perfect wine for him. So what's more special than being the first person to ever have a sample of something? So that's why I gave it to him.
And you told your caterer, Sam, that the bottle of Cara wine was only for Genesis, correct?
Well, it wouldn't be special if I had given it to everyone else.
And the other guests would receive your Horizon wine, right?
Yes, Genesis was more than welcome to drink some of everyone else's Horizon wine as well. But I just wanted to make sure, in order to make that moment special, to be able to give Genesis
Objection, Your Honor, narrative.
Is your response, counsel?
Oh, sorry about that, Your Honor.
No, you're
my
fine.
client is simply just answering the question. There is no indication of a narrative in that. It's just simply answering the question that the plaintiff asked.
I'm going to overrule that particular objection.
Yes, Your Honor. And Harper, earlier that night, Genesis threw the envelope with the note you used to buy him out at you, right?
Could you clarify which night?
The night of the rehearsal dinner.
He had given me back that envelope on the July 7th.
Yes, and this is the same note where you told him that to take the $300,000 or else you would take him out of the picture the hard way, right?
It was just a test to see if, he would just take the money and leave.
But that is the same note, right?
Yes, it was the test note.
So later at 10 p.m., you gave Genesis the Cara wine, right?
That is correct.
And you left the dinner at 10:30 p.m., correct?
I'm kind of old, so I was already pretty tired, especially from having to run around and make sure everything was going smoothly that day.
And at 2:30 a.m., you went to Genesis's room when you found out that someone had been rushed to the hospital, right?
That is correct. I thought that, Genesis had been the one that had been drinking so much that night, so that was my first guess.
And you threw out a bottle that you found in his room, correct?
Correct.
But you ripped off the label of that bottle before you threw it out, right?
I mean, you wouldn't throw out plastic and recyclable glass at the same time, would you?
And you utilize bug-off spray at Peonia Estates, right?
That is correct.
And you're aware that this is an isofenfos organophosphate pesticide, correct?
That is correct. That's the pesticide that we use.
And you're also aware that this pesticide is fatal if ingested, correct?
Well, yes. But, we always do our best to try to make sure that there's no contamination of any sort on the property.
And you knew this was fatal because in late 2018, one of your employees, Kirby Doolittle, drank some wine with pesticide in it, right?
That is correct.
And he almost died, right?
Exactly, which is why we made it such a clear protocol to make sure that that would never happen to anyone else.
And at that moment, you looked in the glass of wine that Doolittle drank and you noticed that any pesticide in the wine wouldn't change the appearance of the wine, right?
Well, wine is dark, so you wouldn't be able to see it.
And you couldn't smell the pesticide in the wine either, right?
Well, maybe it's because I don't, I've been around pesticides forever, but no, I couldn't smell it in the pesticide, any pesticides in that wine.
So on June 7th, 2019, you were aware that somebody drinking wine with the pesticide that your winery uses would not see anything out of the ordinary regarding that wine, correct?
That is correct.
And on June 7th, 2019, you were aware that somebody drinking wine with the pesticide that your winery uses would not smell any pesticide in the wine, correct?
Like I said, maybe I'm just used to the fact that, the smell and everything, but at that moment, I did not think, I didn't think anything of it.
So overall, you knew that any pesticide that your winery uses would not be noticeable at all in your wine.
Correct.
Now let's circle back to around 9 a.m. on June 8th, 2019. You and Casey found out that Genesis had slipped into a coma, right?
That is correct.
And Casey went to the hospital, right?
That is correct.
But instead of going to the hospital, you stayed back with your daughter, right?
Well, I had to make sure that everything, all the other guests were attended to because we just couldn't leave them hanging, and I needed to notify everything else, especially the people that were setting up for the ceremony that, that we just needed some time and it was going to be postponed.
And you're not entirely over Genesis's death, are you?
It still saddens me a little bit because I did lose my husband. So, I just am so upset that that had to happen to my daughter.
But you're actually relieved that Genesis is gone, right?
You know what? Genesis may have been a difficult person, but like I said, I would never hurt anyone. So even though she is gone, some part of me is still kind of upset for Casey.
But you yourself are relieved that Genesis is gone, right?
She had always been a bad influence ever since I knew what happened at that 24th birthday. So I was a tad bit relieved.
Harper, is that a yes or no to my question?
No, I was not entirely relieved.
Is that the statement you would like to make in court today?
Sorry, can you re-say the question? Sorry.
Yes. Are you relieved that Genesis is gone?
Yes, a little bit.
And you're happy that Genesis is no longer a part of Casey's life, right?
Again, like I said, she was a bad influence on Casey. So as a mom, I just didn't want that kind of person to be in my daughter's life.
But you are happy that Genesis is no longer here, correct?
Yes.
And this lawsuit right now is a major threat to your business, right?
Yeah, especially since, the wedding venues and stuff are a major part of our business. It has affected it a little bit.
So you would do anything you could to make sure that the court found you not liable for Genesis's death today, correct?
Well, I would never do anything to put my business in harm's way in the first place. I know I didn't do anything, so that's why I just want to make sure the record is set straight.
But because we are here in trial today, you would make sure that you are not found liable for Genesis's death, correct?
I mean, of course, I don't want to be found liable. Like, who would want to be found liable for something that they didn't do?
Is that a yes or no to my question, Harper?
Objection. Your Honor, the plaintiff is needlessly being repetitive with her questioning on my client.
Response, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm just trying to get a straightforward answer from my question because I believe that Harper has not answered it.
I agree. I'm going to overrule the objection and instruct the witness to answer the question with a yes or no.
So Harper, my question was, you would do anything you could today to make sure that the court found you not liable for Genesis's death. Is that a yes or no? No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect of this witness?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
Right. You may step down. Are there any additional witnesses to be called by the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Does the defense rest?
Yes.
And we take another break at this point, correct? Another 5-minute break? Am I right on that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, good deal. Let's take another 5-minute break and then we will come back for closing argument. All right, we've been gone for about 5 minutes. Are the parties ready to proceed with closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Defense, are y'all ready as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. 1 second. We will now hear closing arguments from each party. Everyone should now switch back to speaker view. And plaintiff's counsel, you may proceed.
Sorry, Your Honor, just having technical
Oh, no,
difficulty.
you're fine.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
This was supposed to be a night to remember. A wedding event, a most sacred event, was supposed to bind Casey and Genesis in name and blood. However, that night on June 8th of 2019, that reality was shattered and torn before their very eyes as this bond was broken by bad blood. Bad blood that led the defendant, Harper Martini, to intentionally poison the wine that was offered to Genesis Petrillo, as you all heard in this trial today. And we are more confident that it is more likely than not that Harper Martini intentionally poisoned this wine, as this was an act of malice, spite, and resentment to remove a thorn from her backside and make it disappear. And that thorn being Genesis Petrillo. So with all the evidence that has been presented to you today, it is clear as day that it is more likely than not that Harper Martini intentionally mixed pesticide with the wine and offered it to Genesis Petrillo with the intent to cause harm. As the distraught widow Casey Soto testified, this bad blood was insinuated ever since the defendant laid eyes on Genesis in 2015. It started out as a minor issue of lack of respect, yet that set the foundation for the spiraling of events that this trial is indicating. The tension between the two was growing insurmountably. And the arguments on the wedding rehearsal dinner on June 7th of 2019 was the straw that broke the camel's back. The anger, frustration, and bad blood boiled over as we heard those tragic words from the best friend of Genesis, Angel Rodriguez, who testified today that Genesis was terrified that Harper Martini was going to kill him. The intent was laid as the motive to make them disappear is apparent. All that was required was the defendant was to act upon that anger and bad blood and intentionally cause harm to the plaintiff, which they did. The action was meticulous and well thought out of, as Angel Rodriguez testified that the defendant told Genesis that they were going to make them disappear. That defendant grabbed a pesticide bottle and poured the contents into the Carolina bottle that were found in Genesis's body, according to the toxicology report, and that she was going to remove the pest, which was Genesis themselves. It is conclusive that the defendant, Harper Martini, converted her bad blood and rage into action, as the same Carolina bottle that was offered only to Genesis, and Genesis alone, was tested positive for organophosphate pesticide points. And even Casey Soto testifies that exclusive bottle was only offered to Genesis as a special gift. That bottle represents both the literal and aspect of an ultimatum, as it was Harper's only option to act upon their bad blood, as it effectively ended Genesis's life. The motivation and the intention are clear-cut. The action was purposeful and cunning. The result was conclusive, as Dr. Kwan concludes and has testified as the only expert witness in this trial today, that the progression of Genesis's symptoms perfectly matched the progression of an expected organophosphate poisoning case. And he can conclude with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Genesis's own physical blood was bad and corrupted with the poison that came from the Carolina bottle that Harper offered Genesis. Now, the defense has come up here and stated that it was the love of liquor that led to Genesis's loss. As a plaintiff, we can agree with that, because Harper saw this as a vulnerability in Genesis, as he knew that Genesis' love of liquor would be his vulnerability. And so therefore, when he offered the Cara wine bottle, Genesis didn't see this as an unsuspecting threat. Rather, he saw it as a gift of respect and appreciation. And Harper Martini took full advantage of that. They brought up 3 witnesses, and I'm confident to say that all 3 of those witnesses have actually increased the strength of our case by trifold. First, with Blair Osborne, she specifically stated that Peony Estates was one of the most hygienic venues that she's ever set up a wedding at. In fact, we can conclude from those statements that it is more likely than not that the act of the poisoning was an act of intent rather than an accident of cross-contamination. And even Austin Riley repeatedly said that Genesis disappearing was the sole goal of Harper Martini whenever she talked to him. That was all that they ever talked about, was getting rid of Genesis and making him disappear. And lastly, Harper Martini, she plotted the perfect crime, as she already had prior knowledge of the fact that there was going to be no smell, no differential taste in the poison itself. So that set up the perfect circumstances for Harper. And as her testimony in court today shows, that she shows no remorse. She's appreciative that Genesis is gone, and that just shows her intent still remains. So let's step back and analyze these 2 themes. Sure, the love of liquor led to Genesis' loss, but that's because Harper Martini willed it so. It was bad blood that grew since 2015, ever since Genesis laid eyes on Harper and made them rift apart. And by giving him the Cara wine bottle, Genesis had predictably signed his own death certificate of this case. So please, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we ask that you find Harper Martini liable for battery.
All right. Thank you, counsel. Defense, you may proceed with your closing argument.
Sorry about that. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Now, something that the plaintiffs are trying to project here on you today, Judge, is this hugely immense story concerning Genesis Petrillo, Harper Martini, and Peony Estates. If you look towards many of their comments made during this trial, they almost try to portray Harper as this megalomaniac villain in this story of loss of life, bad blood, etc. But what I'm here to point out to you today is that while there was a story, there was a lot of gaps in that story that I found quite interesting. Now, starting off, the plaintiffs said in the beginning that they have the burden of proof to firstly prove the intent that Harper had to harm Genesis, and secondly, to prove that Harper even poisoned Genesis. So let's backtrack through this story that the plaintiffs are trying to tell to you, the judge, today. They state that on the night of the rehearsal dinner, Harper and Genesis were increasingly becoming hostile towards each other, making snide remarks, and they even bring up the fact that Harper left a note for Genesis that had negative implications in it. But the thing with all of that, their expert witness, the witness that they bring up to solidify the fact that Harper slipped some kind of poison in Genesis's drink, was Angel Rodriguez. Now, starting off in the defense's own cross of Angel Rodriguez even stated that drinking could have caused her to not remember all the details. And Angel Rodriguez even affirmed my statement that there could be gaps in this story. Now, I asked the jury today, why should we declare such a harsh sentence on Harper Martini for the loss of her own son-in-law based off of the witness's statement that they showed time and time again that they were under the influence of alcohol? Now, an increasingly solid narrative that both sides could attest to in this trial is that Genesis has a problem with alcohol. Like stated earlier in our opening, the love of liquor leads to loss. And tragically, that appears to be the case for Genesis Petrillo. We've seen time and time again in multiple directs and affidavits that Genesis has a habit of drinking all the time. Now, this habit, once it's exemplified, could become deadly. And that's where we come across the witness, Dr. Kwan. Now, as the defense pointed out in the cross, Dr. Kwan works for an organization of people that are basically trying to pass legislation banning pesticides. Now, I ask the court here today, is there a sort of implication of bias in his testimony? If you think about it this way, Dr. Kwan doesn't want alcohol to be the cause. In other words, using the plaintiff's own words against him, when Dr. Kwan saw that bad blood, which showed that his BAC levels were high, Genesis's, he immediately took action. And during that direct and during the cross, he established multiple times that, in his professional opinion, the cause of death was pesticide. But as pointed out by Angel Rodriguez's own testimony, Harper Martini's testimony, we've seen time and time again that drinking is just a habit for Genesis. So conclusively, we can argue here today that alcohol was the cause of death, not just some coincidence with the pesticide that the plaintiff is trying to project onto you today. And ultimately, the defense is right. They state that our witnesses help them, but if we flip that actually, their witnesses help us even more. We'll weigh those two grounds right now. See, like I stated earlier, Dr. Kwan could not be trusted because of an implication of bias because Dr. Kwan works for an organization trying to ban pesticides. And secondly, their star witness, Angel Rodriguez, that supposedly saw Harper walk with pesticide and say that Harper wants to get rid of Genesis and Genesis is a pest, simply can't be trusted because, like stated earlier, in the cross-examination, Angel Rodriguez herself even stated that she couldn't remember what happened that night and that there is gaps in her story. So why would we trust the words of someone who can't even remember what happened that night? Now, let me just redirect our focus to the defense's witnesses. Starting off, if we look at Blair Osborne says time and time again in her own testimony that Harper had nothing but love for Casey. Now, I ask the court this today. If Harper had such love for Casey, why would Harper want to ruin and potentially kill the only thing that matters to Casey, her fiancé? Now, it's no secret that Harper's own fiancé tragically died many years ago. So it's just egregious for the plaintiff to even assume that Harper would want to inflict that same pain that Harper felt herself on her own daughter. And ultimately, that's just the biggest tragedy today, that Casey Soto lost the love of her life, Genesis Petrillo. Now, moving to our other witness, Austin Lewis. We see here that Austin Lewis and Peony Estates followed several times safety codes and stuff to basically keep Peony Estates hygienic. And in the plaintiff's own words, Peony Estates was the most hygienic business that Blair Osborne ever saw. So let me just conjure up this problem in your head. If Peony Estates is the most hygienic place that Blair Osborne has worked for, what's the likelihood that cross-contamination would even occur at an establishment that, according to the plaintiff, had such high regards for hygiene? Now, as tragic as it was, Genesis Petrillo lost his life due to alcohol. Nothing more, nothing less. And that just reflects on our theme that loss of liquor leads to loss. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, counsel. Any rebuttal from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. I have 1 minute and 30 seconds, so.
All right, make use of that time as you wish.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is clear-cut, as it is the evidence has shown you today, that there was always bad blood between Genesis Petrillo and Harper Martini that had risen to the level where Harper plotted the perfect crime. The defense is out here trying to attempt that this was all because of alcohol poisoning. but they have not provided a single expert witness to prove that it was blood alcohol concentration that killed them and not organophosphate poisoning. Our scientist should not have his name dragged through dirt because he represents an organization for the reduced use of chemical pesticides. As a doctor that has worked for 17 years to treat patients with the utmost care, he saw this case not as an opportunity to boost his own agenda, but as any other patient to save. And that's what all this case comes down to. Because if you look at the actual evidentiary statistics, a 0.16%, as Dr. Kwan has testified today, was the peak that it could have reached to. And he states a 0.16 cannot lead to severe cases of coma. And therefore, the only other possibility that, the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that you have to look at is organophosphate poisoning pesticide, which he states it followed the perfect progression of those symptoms more than anything else. So ultimately, you take the intent of Harper Martini and combine it with the action and the motive, we can see that today that he directly poisoned Genesis Petrillo. Please find the defendant liable for battery.
Thank you. All right. We are now going to submit our ballots. Everyone can stay on the Zoom until the ballots have been submitted, and then we'll do a bit of brief feedback, and then we'll let everyone go for the night. Good job, everyone.
All right, I believe both of these scoring judges are done with our ballots.
Okay, and then I think, do we have to wait for them to give us all clear before we do comments?
I think we can give comments. They tabulate really quickly with these electronic ballots. So, of course,
Gotcha.
don't tell us where you're from yet until
Yes, please
everything's good
no.
and tabulated. But yeah, I think we're good to give comments.
Okay, cool. We'll go ahead and do that then. And I think we've all let them know that we're done. So they'll do their part. I'm just going to introduce myself real quick. I'm going to let my scoring judges talk a bit more than I have because I've spent most of this trial talking, and then I'll give kind of some feedback towards the end. My name is Allison Rapond. I am an attorney in Dallas, Texas. I've been practicing law for 7 years now. I work for a firm called Heartline Barger, where I handle kind of general civil defense litigation. I actually deal with a lot of cases involving blood alcohol content issues. And so it's been interesting to kind of hear some of that in this problem. And I also do coach mock trial myself. I coach a team at SMU Law School. I attended Baylor Law School, and I am glad to have had the chance to judge you today.
Perfect. I guess I'll go next. My name's Brandon. I am a management consultant in the Dallas area for a pretty big firm up there. I did mock trial all 4 years at Baylor, was team captain of the A team, was a vice president. So very familiar with mock trial. And then now I get to do a little bit of coaching for their team. So love the sport, love the competition and everything.
So then I guess it's my turn to introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth. I am also a Baylor mock trial alum. I actually was the tournament chair last year. So last year, this was me running everything and getting everything going. I've since moved to Washington, D.C. and now work at the Embassy of Afghanistan. Yeah.
And if y'all, Brandon, Elizabeth, y'all can decide who wants to give feedback first. I'll just wait till the end because like I said, I've gotten to talk a lot today already.
Sure. So I did write down comments. So I did use that comment section. So yeah, that will be submitted to you. So I'm not going to go individually person by person because I know y'all probably want to get out of here. So I'm just going to give some overall comments, but you can read my individual ones later. First of all, great job, everyone. I know this might be your first or second tournament in this new online format. I know it's super, super different. Super interesting. So just congrats to y'all. Some things that you could do to take advantage of this online format and really make it easier for scoring judges. One thing that you can do, doesn't even have to do with the law, just have energy. Look like you're excited to be here. Mock trial really does come down to the presentation aspect when it comes to how you're being scored. And especially through this new virtual format, it's really easy for a judge to either get distracted, get bored, or zone out just because we don't have your physical presence right in front of us. You know, it's a little harder to hear, a little harder to see. So being energetic and really developing those soft skills of varying your pitch, talking louder, talking slower can really help you go a long way whenever it comes to being energetic and looking like you're excited to be here. It's always nice to see competitors who look like they're really having fun whenever you're doing this, because that's what it's all about, is having fun at this point. Something that I think could be worked on also a little better is having a theme that's developed throughout the entirety of your witnesses. I did catch a theme for both sides, the plaintiff being the bad blood thing, the defense being the focus on the alcohol. I suggest having those themes incorporated throughout each of your witnesses. Like, for example, on plaintiff, if you're going with the quote, bad blood, I'm not sure if that quote is actually mentioned anywhere in there, but I would ask every single witness about bad blood, every single witness. Now, I know obviously the expert can't focus on any relationship that was to be had, but everyone, even the witnesses you cross-examine, should have something to say about that can back that up, just so that it's like coherent and cohesive throughout. Something else I would highly suggest is making a super great use of demonstratives and screen share. I'm not sure if any of you were able to watch any trial by combat or any of the senior mock trial videos whenever that was happening a few months ago, but the top teams were using demonstratives throughout the entirety of trial, like for every single witness, for every cross-examination, on openings and closings. That's one of the things you actually can take advantage of through this online format, is that you have technology at your disposal and you can do some really cool things. You can make things up that you don't have to just blow up an exhibit on the screen. You can make charts and timelines and stuff. And I know every case tends to lean towards specific pieces of evidence being used, but I highly suggest getting creative with the demonstratives. That'll make things a lot more fun for the judges to see. And I think it'll really elevate your performance, being creative and taking those extra steps that not a lot of teams are going to take. So those were just some overall comments. You'll be able to read my individual comments. Elizabeth, you have any comments?
I do have comments. I, like Brandon, am going to keep my comments pretty general. I'm tired and it's past my bedtime now because I'm old. So I want to try and get us out of here as quickly as possible. One thing that I think everyone needs to do is to slow down when you're talking. I almost felt like half the time I was watching, those cartoons that you watch and all of the adults are like, wah, 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 wah. That's almost what happened half the time for me in this trial, is because everyone was talking so quickly and moving through material really, really fast. It was very difficult to follow. One other thing, I want to echo Brandon's comment about using technology. You have so much potential here to add in really exciting graphics. You can add in charts, tables. You could even find something that like maybe moves while you're up there, like add some animations or something like that, because normally we're limited to having, a singular piece of cardboard that you can maybe stick a magnet onto, right? You're no longer limited to that. So stop limiting yourself. Add something exciting, something fun for us to watch. Staring at a Zoom meeting for 3 hours is not exactly high on my list of exciting entertainment, right? So make it exciting for me so that I want to pay attention to you and to what you're saying. Other thing I have, openers and closers, I think that you guys need to pay more attention to the law itself. I think I actually, after both openings, had to text Brandon and ask him what the charge was, because I didn't hear that in either opening. I really had no idea what we were charging this person for, right? So definitely make sure that that is very explicit in both your openings and your closings. Explain to me what we're here for, right? It was battery. Tell me what battery is. What do I need to prove to know that that you've won your case, right? What are the elements of battery? How are we going to get there? And really go over that very, very clearly for your judges. Next thing I have, for my witnesses, I'm not just going to hit on attorneys this time. Witnesses need to learn when to take hits and when to fight back. A lot of times I had witnesses who would make a big deal out of something very small, or something that could be easily written off as just saying yes or no to a question. Yes and no are both complete sentences, and sometimes that's the right answer. You don't have to explain away every tiny point in your affidavit, and you really need to pick and choose your battles to figure out what's the most important thing that you need to push back on. Because if you push back on everything, you're going to overinflate the small points and make me want to pay attention less to what you're saying. Because overall, if you fight the attorney on every single point that they bring up in cross, you lose your credibility as a witness. So that's something that I think witnesses really need to work on, is paying attention to what it is that they want to fight on. That's all for me. If Allison wants to go ahead.
Okay. And bouncing off of that real quick, it's just, God, all of y'all gave these long, rambling cross answers to every single question, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It wastes time. I think it's gamesmanship, and I don't like to see it. I know your coaches might be telling you to do that. please pick and choose times, like Elizabeth said, where that's appropriate and where it's not. And if you're going to do a non-responsive answer, keep it short still. Like, don't go on for a paragraph, because it's just, I just don't like to see it. And I know this might be some of y'all's first competitions, but I just don't like to see it. I've gotten to where the more I coach, the more I judge, the more I see how real witnesses handle things. It's just not real life. Real witnesses aren't going to do a long rambling answer to most cross questions to try to screw the attorney over. They're going to say yes, no, and they'll clarify where they need to. So I think that's a good point. Otherwise, I thought, especially like where, I forget who had the accent. I like the accent. It kind of spiced things up a little bit. You'll get to have some more creativity with this than you do in law school mock trial. In law school mock trial, you're really hindered to just playing the character as is. So I would find ways to maybe ham it up a little bit. I think y'all can costume in this competition, but I'm not sure. Like, if you can throw in a costume or like some fun article of clothing and that's allowed in the rules, do that too, because it's going to keep visual interest. I would also recommend finding a way to use this little square. Do hand gestures, or if you have a witness who's being non-responsive, you could do like this to ask them to stop. It's like, that was not my question. Let me ask you again. Like, there are ways you can use your hands, and you'll want to make sure you're far enough away from your screen to where we can still see you, but we can also see your hands. I agree with the visual aids. I agree with the point on closing. I think when you're closing as the plaintiff, you need to tell the jury exactly what you want them to do. And that involves putting the charge up if you have it available and answering those questions for the jury. Element 1, yes. Or if it simply just was this battery. And jurors, you should say yes to this answer. Like, that's what it gives you something to play with during your closing. And it also gives the jury the answer you want. Because in reality, when you're working with jurors, you have people of all different education levels. And so they want you to tell them what answer you want from them. And so that's what you would do in a real trial. A couple points on evidence. When you have a witness who is, well, blah, 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 blah. It's not narrative. Narrative is not your objection. It is the objection the witness is being non-responsive. And so that's why I tried to hint to you a little bit to say, like, I'm not going to sustain that objection, but I would have sustained a non-responsive objection. I forget who did it. I think it might have been, I don't remember, but kind of the way I coach my students to do it is the first time you have a non-responsive witness, you say, was that a yes or no? I think some of y'all did that. And after a couple times of doing that, if the witness is still just giving long answers, that's where you come to the judge, and the judge is likely going to shut it down. And that's how you kind of, if they keep doing it even after that, that's kind of how you win some favor with the judge and with your jurors as well. Sorry, I'm trying to be quick. Also, hearsay is any out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. It doesn't matter if someone else heard it, and that's because I think y'all were trying to use the exceptions. And I know y'all aren't law students. I totally get that. Hearsay is a difficult concept, but you've got to make sure it fits within one of the exceptions. There's so many. And so maybe just take some time, not for this competition necessarily, but take some time and kind of dig into what those exceptions are and what they mean. And I think you'd be very well served by that. Same thing with speculation. If you're asking a witness what they think or what they felt, it's not speculation. The only time you're drawing a speculation objection is when you ask, well, was blah, blah upset, or was blah, blah mad? That's asking someone to dig into the mindset of another individual. And then that is a question that calls for speculation. There's an easy way to fix that potentially, because then you say, did they look mad? That's drawing on the witness's perception. That's the way you fix it, should someone object in that fashion. Sorry, y'all, I know it's late. I did appreciate I agree with all the comments so far in openings. I think y'all did have themes that were effective. I think it would be more effective if you did weave them through. And I thought the plaintiff side was going to do it because I remember hearing an answer with the first witness. They're like, yeah, there was bad blood between them. And then I didn't hear it again after that. And so it's just finding little ways to plug that in to remind us so that when we get to your closing, we're like, oh yeah, bad blood. And it's, it hinges back to those kind of moments of testimony where you brought it up. Oh gosh, trying to think. Everybody did a really good job though. I know we're being nitpicky. If we're being nitpicky, it means you did a good job. It means that y'all were very prepared. I could tell that none of you were reading, which is something with Zoom in particular, it can be very hard because you can look like you're reading when you're not. And all of y'all made great like center eye contact with the screen. I thought that was really good. I can tell that you've all done a lot of work to prepare. And so you should be very proud of yourselves. Your coaches should be very proud. And yeah, I think that's all I've got. I'm going to submit some written comments too. One final thing, and this is just something I recommend. Instead of ladies and gentlemen of the jury, consider using members of the jury because it is more inclusive. And so that's just, it's a quick fix. Odds are people aren't going to ding you for saying ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Odds are most people are not going to be bothered by that. But you could have a situation where you have someone who is, for example, non-binary or someone who does not associate with being male or female. Then you don't want to make that person feel a lack of connection with you. So that's why I suggest members of the jury instead. It's inclusive. You're not ever going to hurt someone by saying members of the jury because it's non-gendered. I think it works a little better, or some variant on that. Yeah, that's all I've got. I'll submit my comments. Y'all did great. Once again, I keep doing this. If you want to go to law school, this is a great way to get yourself kind of a leg up. It's also going to help just from a practical standpoint in your work lives if you don't go to law school, because the skills you'll learn through this process are super helpful in so many areas of life. But yeah, great job. Gonna let y'all go. And so you can all log off now. Thank you so much for your presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.